Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for the first conversation in this new series of talks. I'm Kate from Beam, and we're a founding member of the National Arts and Place Consortium. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the other members of the group that have helped to curate this series together, and also to the Art Fund for their support. And of course, a big thanks to all our artists and guest speakers who'll be joining us over the next 7 weeks. All the details can be found on the website for all the different talks, and each talk is being streamed live by YouTube. So if you have any questions or thoughts, please use the comment section and we'll try and pick these up towards the end of the conversation. Feel free to help spread the word by using hashtag #ArtsAndPlaceNow. And if you want to carry on the conversation, join us on Twitter. And also we're setting up a LinkedIn group as well. So I'm now pleased to hand over to Helen Pheby and Rebecca Chesney. We can get them on screen. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks very much for the invitation to discuss with Rebecca her long relationship with Yorkshire Sculpture Park. And I'm head of curatorial programme at YSP, which is, we describe ourselves as an international centre for the creation, display and appreciation of art. And we are very much a particular place. So we manage a historical landscape, which we know has been occupied for around 1,000 years. And there are so many layers of human activity on that site that it's a very rich resource for artists to work with. And one of the key strands of our programme is well-being of people and planet, and how the two are so closely woven. And I think with the particular place that we have at the Sculpture Park, which has 2 man-made lakes, vast historical planting, and then self-seeded planting, different areas of landscape. And we're always thinking about the relationship between heritage, nature and art, and how the three can really celebrate each other and create particular experiences for people. And I first saw Rebecca's work at Mid Pennine Arts in Burnley in, I think, 2009, and a project called Find, which was plant surveys on the Weaver's Triangle. And I thought there was something scientific, but also poetic, and that brought about a different sense of looking at a particular place. So I did know that area quite well, and I thought it would be really exciting to invite Rebecca to make a proposal for YSP. So you came and visited, I think, first in 2009, I think, Rebecca.
Yeah, it was 2009.
And did you know the Sculpture Park already? Was it...
Yeah, because so years and years ago, I used to live in Norfolk, but I'm from Lancashire, and we used to pass it on the way between Norfolk and Lancashire, and we used to use it as a stop off. So I've been going since, late teens, maybe in my 20s, definitely in my 20s. So, of course, it was always one of those, like, oh, wouldn't it be great to do some work there? So, yeah, it was pretty wonderful to be invited.
And the way that we approached it was, I didn't sort of say, I want you to do a particular project on this or that. It was very much, do you want to just come and have a look and a walk around and see if inspiration strikes?
Because also you just, as the park, you'd only just acquired... I don't know if acquired is the right word, but you just got the lake. Yeah. Because up until then, it had not been accessible to the public. Or I don't know whether you bought it, but I know that you were interested in kind of artists exploring that particular area.
Yeah, and that is a very different area. So the areas around the lakes, because they haven't been... when you first came to visit with me, because they hadn't been very publicly accessible for many years, they had a very particular feel to them, which was quite different to the rest of the park. And we didn't want to start putting big monumental sculpture in there because it wasn't the right scale. There's something much more intimate about that place, I think. And so, yes, I think we went for a walk around the lake.
We did, yeah.
And what was your sense?
And then you sort of said, what do you want to, have a think about what you want to do? And I thought, the curator of Yorkshire Sculpture Park has said, think of something. So I did go into deep thought about, right, okay, if I'm going to propose something, it better be something interesting. And because of the work I've been working on previously, of course, it it kind of followed on from that. But I thought to look at all the bee species and use that as a good starting point.
And was it
a great idea?
Had you worked with bees before, so to speak?
Like in my gang? No, not especially. Like I love looking at plants.
Yeah.
And if you look at plants, you don't just look at plants. You look at insects and birds and everything else connected. So I'd say I had a base knowledge of bees. So then this gave me the opportunity to expand my knowledge greatly and learn so much. I don't know when do you want to should we put slides up?
Oh yeah.
They've got slides, everybody. If there's anybody watching. And I've put together quite a lot of images to describe a very complicated 10-year project. Yeah, and so bear with me as I whiz through 10 years of information, but hopefully you'll get the gist of what it is that we wanted to do, what we did with it, and where it's going now. So my work is about landscape. And like I said, I was working on other things that are kind of connected to this. All projects are pretty much connected. So I wanted to survey the whole site. If you don't know the site, it's like 500 acres of quite mixed habitats, I suppose. There's traditional parkland, there's woodland, there's arable, there's what remains of formal gardens, wilder bits. So it's a really lovely site, very mixed. So of course it gave me a fabulous opportunity to survey it for bumblebees and solitary bees. If we can have the next slide, that would be great.
So I can't remember how many months you came for, like a day's residency each month, didn't you, for about 6 months? Was that right? Yeah,
I came over 8 months, and I would come for a couple of days about every 3 weeks. So I was seeing it through a good amount of seasons, spring, summer, into autumn. So it started in March and it ended in sort of about October, I think.
And that was in 2010, so it's 10 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 10 years, yeah. We've thrown me in.
So I see that now as a quite iconic image of you with the catcher, with the net. You actually catching, you were actually going out catching and identifying. And
yeah, so I'd never done that before, and this kind of project always brings people in that you never even knew would get connected with a project. So an ecologist that lives locally to me impressed and got hold of me and was like, "Oh, I've seen you doing a project about bees. Do you want to go out bee IDing?" So he sort of taught me how to sort of catch bees, put them in an ID tube, ID them, and then let them go, obviously. And of course that was essential, because if you're running around after bees and just relying on sort of blurred photos the whole time, or just not getting close to them, you kind of do, if you want to take it, if you want to actually ID the bees, you do have to do that. So that was a really good thing to learn.
And how many, I mean, before you started working on this project and brought it to my attention, I hadn't even realised how many different types of bees there are in the country, and that we might be able to see, I think, there's a bumblebee or a honeybee, but there's actually much, much more.
Yeah, you're going to ask me now how many bumblebees are around. I can't remember, but there's a lot. And then, I mean, solitary bees is like over 200 species of solitary bee in UK. And of course, a solitary bee potentially doesn't look like what you'd think a bee looks like, a traditional bee image.
Yeah.
I mean, I think honeybees are a bit, they don't, because they're different from a bumblebee. When you start if you're very new to looking for bees, you'll be like, "Oh, what is that? Oh, it's a honeybee. I never knew one looked like that." So, so as well as looking for all the bumblebees and solitary bees, we set up 2 honeybee hives by the boathouse where my studio was, and I became an apprentice beekeeper under the guidance of the regional bee inspector, Ivor Flatman, so that then I was able to have this amazing opportunity to observe the life cycle of a bee at really close range and become a beekeeper. So that was a second strand of the project.
And was that when you installed the internal one as well that you could see within the studio?
Yeah, there's an observation hive. So there's the traditional hives outside, and then there was a tube in the wall into the studio, and then a sealed observation hive. So it's like one of the frames, I suppose. You see what the beekeeper is holding. It's like one of those, and it's got perspex on it and a cover, so that then I could take the cover off and see into the hive at any time. That was magic, absolutely magic, seeing that. Yeah. Can we have the next slide?
And I think so lots of things kind of came out of your research. So it was very much a live project, and then so that the audio recordings that became drawings, the photographs, drawings of dead bees, mapping, so the really beautiful maps you did of different areas, and you mapped not only the bees but also the plants that they were feeding on and how that changed.
Yeah. I suppose this is the process, isn't it? I wanted to know what bees were on site and where they were feeding, because that then shows you how healthy the site is. It did involve like so many other people, so you can't actually walk around a public site with a bee net in your hand without every single person stopping you and asking you what you're doing. And of course, everybody has a story about bees in some way. Everybody wants to tell you what they know about bees. So that was really fascinating. You gather that much information from everybody, what they think of them, what they're doing for them, what they know might be the problem of threat to bees. So it's a rich subject. So of course, all the events that we did were so popular. Like we did walks and talks and workshops, and that top right hand image is in the studio where the beekeeper is showing all the visitors into the observation hive. And I love that image. I know you can't see what they're seeing, but I love their faces, so intrigued by what's being revealed to them. And we did we collected pledges. So if somebody pledged that they would plant more things in their gardens, they got a sort of limited edition enamel badge, and we gave out flower seeds, sort of locally sourced flower seeds. And so there's quite a lot of sort of knowledge sharing, I suppose, and gathering.
You built a map, didn't you, when people made a promise to either build a bee-friendly hideaway or plant something in their gardens. And I think that went international, didn't it? It wasn't just UK visitors.
Yeah, and because it was a long, I find that longer projects can sometimes be really good for gathering sort of a following almost, because then people contact you from all over the world, scientists, artists, like everybody, members of the public, interested in this. Like people get hold of you all the time about it, which I think is really, I think that's brilliant. Do you want to show the next slide, please?
And then we invited, so people would identify, so there were the lovely postcards as well, and people could go around Sculpture Park and identify them and start to feed that into a community of knowledge. And I think what was wonderful is it wasn't exactly scientific. So, you know, it wasn't that everybody identified the bee correctly necessarily, but that was part of the joy of it as well. It was just that engagement and that appreciation.
Yeah, I don't think it ever really matters. I know, so this is a map, one of the maps that I made. I did a series, one for each month of everywhere that I saw the bees. And it is all based on truth, but of course it's not very scientific. You couldn't use it for anything scientific, but as a series, you could see where they shifted around the site. So you could see in spring they were feeding on the hawthorn, and then they'd shift over to the lime trees, and then you could, if you run them in sequence, you can see where all the bees would shift around the park, and I think that that's kind of interesting. Yeah, but they're accurate, but only to a point. So they are an artwork. They're an artwork.
But there is always that in your work. There is always that blurring of the boundaries between the scientific and the artistic, and that inquiry. I mean, I think to me, it's very much about inquiry.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, got that right. Can we have the next slide, please?
And you also collected a lot of flower samples and pressed them of the flowers that the bees were feeding on at different times.
I try and do this for most projects, even if they don't ever become part of the final thing. If I've got permission, you know, I'll collect pressings like wherever I go, and like on any project. So at York Sculpture Park, I could then, it's like evidence of what you've got on site, and it's documenting. So I did collect a lot for this project, and of course, I mean, the one on the left is bramble, the one on the right is rhododendron. So of course, you've got kind of the wild with the formal, I suppose, in those two instances. Yeah, so it reflects also the identity of the site, I think, as well. It sort of reflects what you've got as a place.
Yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't, you know, I'm not just looking for interesting species. I'm looking for.
Did you feel that your relationship with that place changed? That, you know, you developed quite a sense of ownership over particular areas?
There were definitely bits that, I mean, that, like, you become really close to a site then, and you notice changes, and especially if you're going back repeatedly, sort of over an amount of time, because you see the changes with the seasons and maybe different visitors, and yeah, and you meet regulars, and I mean, you then become closer to all the staff as well. So like the security guards would tell me in the mornings if they'd seen foxes or deer, or see, like that you constantly, I don't know, swapping information about a site that then is important. Yeah, so I did feel like I was really connected to the site. Yeah. If we go on to the next, Amy,
we had a display in the upper space that in the visitor centre during a residency that kind of brought quite a lot of it together in a culmination.
Yeah.
Including the mythology and the history of the mythology of bees, which was really beautiful. And then you started to have an idea for a major intervention within the landscape based on the research and the ideas that you came up with, which is articulated here on this topographical map.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of that. I made that all myself in the back room. So with all this kind of stuff that I'd gathered, information about bees, I thought, well, you'd left it really open as to what I could do with that, which is a gift, by the way. I have to say that is always really amazing for an organisation to give you that freedom. And I thought, well, I could do like an exhibition of pictures about bees or whatever, or I could potentially try and think of what could you do about the threat to bees, or how could you redress that. So my proposal was to make create habitat for bees. So it's not recreating it, it's not conserving an already made habitat. It's a created one. And it was 2 meadows, each an acre in size, which are pretty massive. That's 4,000 and odd square meters each.
Yeah.
And one entirely of yellow flowering species and one entirely of blue flowering species, all from the observations that I've made on site. So this is like my proposal in sort of topographical map form. But for various reasons, I mean, this is 9 years ago, but there's lots of reasons why we didn't do it at York Sculpture Park. We did like big test plots that like were really brilliant, like out the back of the gallery. and we did all the research there, but some things just don't. I mean, I think it's interesting. It was a proposal.
Yeah.
Because like here is what you could have, and then you know. And actually, I learned a lot about this because I now often propose things that I know I deliberately sometimes propose things that are asking questions, and you have to answer why you're not going to let me do it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
This was there was a will to do it. It's a really beautiful project, but the practicalities on a site like ours, and it's under various different stewardships.
Stewardships and funding, and the government had just changed, and funding streams that we were going to tap into were then became more restricted, and I think it actually, I mean, obviously I was disappointed at the time. However, I think it became really important to the whole thing, because my work is about the politics of landscape, it's about economics, it's about our value in nature and how we value it. And this sort of was about that.
It raised a lot of questions, didn't it? And it did for us internally as well, about the use of the landscape and the land, and how we are only stewards of it, as well as that being on the stewardships.
I think also creating a habitat as a sculpture is an interesting one, because so when we did finally get funding for the Everton Park meadows,
that come about. So after your YSP project and the garden gallery exhibition and the book and various things that came out of that, there was then this possibility that you could you could create the work elsewhere.
Yeah, and it was interesting. It was always art funding that funded it, and not ecology funding. Not going to go anywhere near it. So I think those kind of things, when you're growing something as an artwork, is kind of interesting. Anyway, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so this. So although it couldn't be sort of done at York Sculpture Park, I was. There was a curator at Liverpool Biennial who was aware of my proposal, and we were talking at the same event, and because she came to York Sculpture Park, and she's like, "Oh, I think I know a site that might be suitable. It's in Everton Park in Liverpool." And so I was like, "Oh, right, okay." And it was a bit like, well, I make work about particular places. This was for Yorkshire Sculpture Park. I wonder how I feel about that. And then it was like, yeah, but I'm so determined that this might work, you know, as an actual thing. And the threat to bees is national and all the rest of it. So I thought, actually, yeah, I think we should have a go at it. So
have that conversation.
Say that again.
When did you have the conversation about the Liverpool possibility?
Well, she came to the exhibition, so that was 2011.
Right. Okay.
And I went to visit the site in probably by the end of then, because she introduced me to everybody at the National Wildflower Centre, which is based in Liverpool. There are key things that have made this project happen. Yeah. Obviously, the first one was Yorkshire Sculpture Park. It was key. That's where I did all the research. They, you know, supported me through that. We did the test plots, and then of course having a high-profile exhibition, people see it and talk about it. So she introduced me to people at Liverpool City Council Parks Department and the National Wildflower Centre. We all had a meeting.
And who was that Liverpool that you were working with?
Sorry?
Who was it, the curator in Liverpool you were working with?
Oh, Laurie Peake. The fabulous Laurie Peake, who was like a whirlwind around Liverpool. Yeah. So, and she got us all together. She was really good at that, getting people together in the same room. And yeah, I remember going to the meeting and going, right, I've got this idea. And I just thought, oh, well, chat to everybody. I was really nervous, and I'll sort of propose it. And bearing in mind, I'm not connected to the site, so it felt odd for me that, you know, like proposing something to somewhere I've, you know, not any connections to. And I was like, well, you know, I thought they might all say, well, we'll think about it, we'll get back to you. And on that hillside, they did all just go, yeah, sounds all right, that, yeah, let's do it.
Brilliant.
Okay, we'll get on with it then. So can you go on to the next slide, please? So this is the 2 acres on that big plot. This is about the second year. The first year it was made of annuals and the perennials coming up, and then the second, third and fourth year it was the perennials establishing. Can we go to the next slide?
Nice.
Thank you. So this is image of the blue side. This is when the perennials are more established, cornflower and Viper's bugloss in there. And the next slide, please, thank you. And then I've done a montage because I was only restricted to like 15 slides. Like, no chance, I'm going to squat 800 images into the 15 slides. So this is a combination of all the species that have cropped up in the blue sides that we planted, and then some are not planted. We've had a lot of things that have cropped up just because they've cropped up.
Yeah.
Can we go to the next slide, please? And then the yellow side, this again is when the perennials were more established. Those are meadow buttercups. And you can go.
You originally had visioned this for the sculpture park, but I think there's something so amazing about then having the city backdrop.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's completely different. I think how it's gone, even though that's not what we planned, I think this is the best thing that happened to it. The 2 sites are completely different. Because also, I mean, like the Everton Park is a park. It's not attached to an events place. It's not. It's within a quite densely populated area of the city. Yeah, so I mean, we've never put a sign on it. It's never said this is a sculpture.
Yeah, but that's kind of even more wonderful, isn't it? And people who perhaps would never come to a sculpture park or going to an art gallery are going to experience that when they're walking the dog or going out to play football. Or
yeah, and I'm not bothered that they never know. Why should I be bothered? But
they'll notice. You know, whether they notice.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also, it's kind of it's pushing the boundaries of what the definition of art is, if you know what I mean. It's still been done lots. I'm not saying it's not been done. I'm just saying that, you know.
But it's definitely changing that place.
Oh yeah, definitely. Something. I mean, you saw the first slide. That's how it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, and I wanted the 2 meadows to be a really striking, deliberate act on the landscape. I wanted you to know that somebody had done it. It's not like a traditional drifty meadow. It's right in your face. Yeah. Can we go on to the next slide, if that's all right? And again, like with every project, I do document them by collecting specimens.
And the dandelion relates to a previous project you did, doesn't it, in Japan? Is that right?
There's there's corn marigold on one side and the common toad flax on the other. Yeah, I do. I've got an absolute love of dandelions. So we've done weeding events on the plots, which surprisingly are not that popular. It don't matter how much marketing you do for a weeding event, you'll only get get your husband and your friends turning up. But I've always left the dandelions round it and in it, and there's lots of weeds in the plots because bees love weeds. So
yeah, and weeds are, who's to say what is a weed? There's a whole psychology around that, isn't there, about plants?
Yeah, when the very first weeding event, so then the blue patch and the yellow patch were quite, you know, the blue and yellow, and then one of the people that turned up, Andy, who was local to the meadows, and been a big supporter of the meadows, he came and did weeding 2 years running, I have to say. But I think one of his first questions was, right, what we're pulling up, what do we count as a weed? Because there's daisies growing in the blue patch, and it was like, no, leave the daisies. So suddenly I was like, how rigid am I going to be with my colour scheme? Anyway,
they really start to get a sense of ownership of it. It become their garden.
Yeah, because you've got people like you can pick armfuls from plots that big, and it won't make any difference. So I think some people are nervous about wandering into them. Like, but there's a desire line between the two of them where people do training and walking, and you go. There's a sort of a path all the way around them, so they are sort of on this fabulous sort of amphitheatre of space. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you very much. Well, we've done quite a lot of events on the meadows. So my involvement with the two meadows really only lasted about 4 years, because after that they were taken on by the local community. So the yellow and blue squares lasted probably for 2012, 13, 14, and probably into 15, so 4 summers. And the council kept cutting round them. But in 2015, there was a project called The Tale of Two Cities, and like they got funding from the Grow Wild England flagship award scheme. And it was decided, let's expand the meadows.
Oh, wow. Okay,
I wasn't especially involved with this. I was happy for it to happen. But you do need to manage meadows. So it's like, what do you do with them? Do you just cut them down and go back to grass? Or what are you going to do about it? So from the determination of a few key people and people around the site, they raised the money and then expanded the meadows to cover that whole amphitheatre. Yeah. And I think rightly so, they didn't stick to the yellow-blue mix. That's just going to be too complicated. So it was surrounded by a general meadow mix. My blue and yellow patch is still in there. And then there's been funding in 2018 from the Eden project. Yep. And Liverpool City Council has put funds in for 2019-2020, so this year as well. So I think the legacy of the project is really important, and kind of, it's something that you would wish for a project, but I don't know how you would ever plan for it, if you know what I mean. So when I grew the meadows, I always thought, well, if we could have them on there for like 3 years and then we'll see what people think of it. Yeah. I mean, the top right-hand image is of the local primary school that now do lessons on it every year about ecology and diversity and species. And the bottom right-hand image, it was a big sort of celebration event of the development of all the meadows. So not especially about my meadows, but about the whole development of Everton Park. And it continues. So can you please go on to the next image? So this is how they looked in 2018. The whole of the bowl is now wild flowers. There's a lot of annuals in that, because that was one of the, they put annuals in that year. And if you go on to the next slide, please. They're more mixed, they change all the time. Every time I go to the meadows, they've changed. And it's a fabulous dynamic space. It's what you don't get from the images is the movement and the life in that place.
But I think it's very generous of you to have let it go. It was, that you've allowed it to evolve and be shaped by the people of the city and the local people who are using it. rather than retaining this rigid kind of 2 acres, my blue yellow.
Yeah, I could have been. Yeah, I could have been Stampy Footy artist at that point, couldn't I? Flouncing about.
My meadow.
Yeah, they're not doing it like this and not having them at all. No, they've made them. It's really interesting. As I walk from the train station and I walk along to the meadows, it's about half an hour walk from the train station. And every time since 2012, you don't see them on the horizon because they're in that little bowl. Yeah. So every time I'm a bit anxious, like, oh God, what if everything's died? What if somebody's accidentally mowed it? What happened? Every single time I go, I get that uplifting joy of seeing a field of flowers. That's and I think, I did that.
Yeah. Wonderful. And the people I've been to visit it, and what you were saying as well was really nice, that there's a community of people who research bees, who have contacted you because they're aware of your various different projects working with bees. And there was it the University of Sheffield, the Art and Science Conference, where there were people talking about bees from an ecological point of view, but also in literature, and it's kind of, from just that one initial visit to YSP, lots of things have grown from it, no pun intended, but it's been a thread that's run through your practice as well for those 10 years. And the plan was for you to come back to YSP this summer and to revisit the monthly mapping. And obviously you're not allowed there at the minute, so you can't do that.
Oh, no. I'm absolutely gutted, because I was so raring to go, like, 10 years, like coming back and seeing what you've done, the site has changed. Anyway, we'll do it next year.
Actually, as we're talking, I'm thinking it might be interesting for you to come when we are able to, just because it's been closed to people. It might be interesting to see the effect that has had on the landscape.
It'd be amazing to have a chat with you. Probably not right now, but the management, has it had to be stepped back a bit? I don't know, or changed slightly, or there's not the footfall on it.
We just know that at the Sculpture Park, that having the fact that visitors aren't allowed there, and there are very few. I mean, there's security and there's people on site, but badgers have been coming right up to the underground gallery, which they never would normally do. They've been captured on TV and around the National Arts Education Archive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long for reclamation.
No, because I think it's kind of already there in the background, sort of. Obviously we could do better, couldn't we, as a nation with our wildlife, but we'd get glimpses, but then actually, if you just shut a site for a bit, I mean, with the foot and mouth thing, and then lots of sites were shut all those years ago, and the orchids were popping up all over the place, and you know what I mean, people not trudging all over everything does make a big difference. And
I think hopefully a legacy of this really difficult, challenging time we've been through is that there is a greater appreciation for coexistence with the rest of the world and the nature. And people seem to have been much more conscious of bird song and saying, is it louder this year, or are we just noticing it more? And blossom and natural space and habitats have become so much more important, and hopefully that's something which we'll hang on to and not just go back to getting in our cars and going.
Wouldn't that be nice? It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the Institute of Public Policy Research North just published a paper yesterday about a Green New Deal for the North, which is really exciting, and talking about how the Northern Powerhouse should be completely rooted in landscape. And so let's not recreate an industrial, technological London up in the north, but let's really look at the moorland that needs attention, the habitats that need attention, and that's where our economy will grow from.
Yeah. Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, it's. I'll send you a link. It's really
yes, please.
And has lockdown changed? Obviously there was the YSP project, which is now postponed, but has it given you time to reflect on your practice, or have you just not had the headspace because of the moment we've been in? Or
Well, I've gone through probably different phases.
Yeah.
So at the very beginning, it was just plunged into, I don't know, uncertainty, and every single job that I got was like delayed for a year.
Yeah.
So that was all the things that was just building up to. But I suppose, yeah, this time, so then I was feeling completely uninspired, and fraught with, you know, family things, you know what I mean? It's like all combined, isn't it?
Yeah.
The longer it's kind of going on, I've reflected a lot about what it is that I do, what do I want. I think it's time for us all to reflect, like you said, like this greening future that we quite fancy, this green future. You can already, you know, we're all should be on bikes and walking. That's brilliant, but of course, public transport has been sort of banned. You know, we're not allowed to go on trains and buses. So then, what are the alternatives? We are going to very rapidly go back to where we were, I fear, and I think that is just so depressing. I think it's time for everybody to reflect on what it is we can do.
Yeah.
What is it do we want from nature, from our society, for places, for what do you know, the place that we want to live? This could be a really great time to rethink. And we know lots of the problems. We know them all. Yeah. And if we don't really think about like actively questioning where it is that we want to be, I mean, I think it would be a really great opportunity for art organisations and institutions to think about where they want to be. I mean, you said that that this 2020 programme was all women.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
It wasn't anything that you'd planned. It just sort of managed to be all women artists showing at the same time.
Yeah,
and that is amazing.
It wasn't that we set out to say, right, we're going to have an all-women programme, which, you know, is a laudable thing to set out to do. We just set out to do the best programme that we felt was relevant to now, and it just happened to be that it was Joanna Vasconcelos in the Underground Gallery, Holly Hendry, Nicola Sanfal, Rachel Kneebone. So all of these projects will still happen next year, but we were just preparing for this incredible moment. And then there was a lot as well to do with well-being and landscape. So, for example, Simon Armitage was going to launch his Laurel Prize. So he's using his laureate money for Poetry Prize for poetry that celebrates nature, draws attention to nature. So that'll be next year. But, you know, I mean, things will all still happen. But I think, you know, there's a huge opportunity right now for us to have a reset rather than a restart, isn't there? And like you,
I think that. I mean, you and me have talked about like the inclusion of working class in the art world. Yeah. I mean, I think we all know what we think of the art world that we operate in. I'd quite like my work to fit into a nicer future where the art world is diverse in all directions, inclusive. I think it's time that some organisations listened rather than just did the telling. You know what I mean? We should be listening to everybody and I think this is the time that we need to do that.
What do you think the mechanism is for that? Do you think that, I mean, how do we actually invite that dialogue? You know, so there is, you know, so I'm doing like Instagram Live and doing, in fact, it's a good time to invite people if they want to ask questions, just post them in the live comments and then we can pick those up as well.
I've been teaching my mum to type all week.
Really tricky ones. Go on. How many bumblebees are there? Can you draw them all? So there's a question from That Looks Queer as to, are bees better able to see yellow and blue? I know they are more attuned and able to see UV. but where the colour choice is a conscious choice rather than an aesthetic choice?
That's a really good question, because Liverpool John Moore's students used the blue and yellow squares to do study, and different species liked the different sides. So you'd get the long-tongued bees, bumblebees mainly, in the blue side, and you'd get like honeybees and hoverflies and sort of the some of the other species in the yellow side. So yeah, bumblebees did tend to go to the blue side.
So John Moore's actually used your meadows for research. That's brilliant for live research.
Yeah, and they invite me back every year to do a talk to the ecology students about the meadows and ecology and culture, I suppose. That link, Dr. Colm Bow sort of has invited me to speak there every year. And so it's come from that, really, that relationship between the meadows and the university. So that's quite nice.
There's a lovely message from Laurie. Says hello. Hello, Laurie. And apparently you were very determined for the meadows to be blue and yellow, although there was a suggestion in Liverpool that they should be blue and red.
Yeah, so when I first, my choices of yellow and blue were based on how many species of each could I put into a plot. So I didn't really want pink. There wasn't many white species that I thought would go like survive. So it was about it. That was more of a scientific, what have I seen bees feed on type of decision. So I wanted them blue and yellow. But then when I got to Everton, everybody kept going, well, surely there should be blue and white or red and blue. And I kept thinking, like being a complete idiot, I was like, I don't really understand that. And then it was like, oh, I get it. They think I should do the football colours.
But that was,
I could have done like a big football display, but we didn't.
It's divisive, isn't it? It's, yeah. There's a message from Richard Bliss. He talks about Everton Park original meadows as a striking, deliberate act on the landscape. Does this make it the artwork? If so, is the meadow still an artwork? I mean,
Good question.
Just seeing those images then when it popped up brought to mind Agnes Dean and the cornfield outside. So there's this kind of art historical nod to the kind of land art and feminist art of the 1970s and thinking about use of land and food production, particularly in her case. But I hadn't really made that connection till just seeing it on screen then.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted it to be a piece of land art, but the thing I wanted most was it to create forage for bees. That's actually the whole thing, was to create somewhere that is better than it was before, as in the green lawn bit, and create really rich source of food for bees. But then, of course, I could have just done a meadow, but then so could anybody have just done a meadow. And I wanted it to be an artwork at the same time as an artwork as habitat. So it had to be visually striking. Whether it's an artwork still is a really good question. I would say, because it's so beautiful, yes. It's mine when I like it, and if I decided they'd done something that I didn't agree with in extending it, then I probably would say the artwork isn't there anymore, maybe. Anyway,
sort of I'm blue, you're yellow. How did that come about?
Oh yeah, it's like, this is my patch, that's yours patch.
Right.
Like it's got blue in the title and yellow in the title. We're always made to think of titles like, can you think of a title and send us some images in the next 15 minutes?
And do you think it would, I mean, that now has become, although you didn't feel as connected to Everton Park as you did YSP initially, that now has become so part of that place and that site, hasn't it? So
the
approached you to do it somewhere else, would you feel you could, or that was now it, that it's kind of got its site?
Well, I think that's a really good question as well, because I'm asked a lot over the years to do meadows or do a planting scheme, but you have to consider each site for lots of different reasons, and almost all of them are not suitable to create a meadow. We could do it somewhere else. It would be nice to do it somewhere else. I've learned a lot. I've learned how I'd do it differently. I've learned how I'd do it. We learned along the way. So there are things that I would do differently. I think it is what it is, and it is the one place, and it has become about Everton, and I'm more connected to the site. Obviously, we just go like every year.
I know the way you work is it's not project to project to project, in the sense that you know, how is this going to feed into, or has it already fed into future projects that you're working on?
Say that again.
So the future projects that you're working on, how has the YSP project and then the Everton project, has that fed into further inquiry and outcomes?
I think how I work it, and presumably like most artists, you don't then leave something and get on with the next thing. Everything sort of becomes these strands through into the next project, and you gather all these things. I mean, I gather people around me, so plant people, bee people, and they potentially all come with me onto the next project, and followers of, different or volunteers that helped you, and then you all move on to the next project. Really, I would say that obviously on something like this, I'm learning all the time. I'm not an ecologist. I'm an artist, so there's so much I'm learning with every project, but you take that to the next one. I would say that all my past projects feed into the next ones.
Is there always a socially engaged element? That Looks Queer is asking, is there always that sense of taking a community with you, or not educating a community, it's the wrong way, of opening people's eyes to something and then being part of that process of learning with you? I mean, that's what I sensed at YSP, was you invited people into your learning. It wasn't that you were telling people how to identify.
Well, I think you're going along a path together.
Yeah.
And there's people ahead of you on that path that that'll tell you stuff. And there's people that you can take along with you. Almost particularly, like my knowledge of bees was very basic when I started on the York Sculpture Park, and I had to learn really rapidly. But that was part of the process. In doing that learning, you're sharing that, and people are sharing their knowledge with you. I couldn't have done it without everybody telling me what they know. I think that that's really vital to a healthy project. Actually, I might be new to a site. There are other people that have lived and worked on a site forever. Now, I might see something different or translate it differently, but
I think because I've been at the Sculpture Park for an incredibly long time, but when you came to do your project, I began to see it in a different way. Then I was looking for bee-friendly plants, and I was looking out for bees, and then each artist opens my eyes to something differently every time. And that's the pleasure of that place and the fascination of that place. And Fran Guy has asked whether, although the meadows couldn't happen, did the research have an impact on how we manage the estate? And we still have the beehives that Ivor still maintains.
Real.
He runs beekeeping courses from them, and we sell YSP honey in the shop, and it's served in the restaurant. So there's this very, very localized hive to plate kind of situation there. But also I learned through your project where the bees were at different times of year, and how we can help work with our estate team to create bee highways and make sure that we're not, unnecessarily doing work in areas that is going to compromise those habitats in any way. And I'm sure you remember Claire Midwood from the estates team.
Yeah.
These beautiful bee-friendly garden areas, and so
yeah, because they shift around so much, and because things go in and out of season plant-wise, the more diverse your site is. Anyway, we're not talking just about Yorkshire Sculpture Park, but the more diverse you know, and how long your flowering period is, it will help bees.
There's just one question that I wanted to pick up. Somebody asked for the Northern Powerhouse paper. So that is the Institute for Public Policy Research North. It's IPPR North. So if you search for them, it'll come up with their homepage. And I think it's their first thing on the homepage, this report, this 30-page report that they've put up. So I think that was really interesting. It's always brilliant to talk to you, Rebecca.
Hey.
We miss you. That's what, you know, one of the, it was purely selfish to invite you back so we could hang out with you and learn more about these. So I'm really grateful to Kate and the invitation to be here, and to Art Fund for funding the programme, and for all of the partners who are involved. It's been a really enjoyable session, and I hope those of you who've been watching it found it as well.
Yeah, and I also, if people have got more questions or comments that we didn't quite, especially if they're nice ones, they can always like tweet me now or email me, or you know, that kind of thing. I don't mind if the conversation continues a bit. I'm not
to do some weeding for you. Jackie Jones has offered to come do some weeding. I'm not sure. I presume that's the artwork, not just your allotment.
Oh. I've been on the allotment loads, so there's not a weeding site. There's quite a lot of dandelions. And Matt, who I do the allotment with, isn't so happy about that.
And Jenny has asked Jenny Steele, whether what you were thinking of doing with the YSP this year. So you were going to come back as a visiting artist again and do the mapping again and see how that compared. And then we didn't really know where that might go, did we?
No, but also I was interested in like how far along have we got as a group, as in not just Yorkshire Sculpture Park, but being on site, I will have access to masses of visitors, and I want to know, like, what are we doing about it? What do people still think about bees? How far have we got in 10 years? Like we were talking about the threat to bee 10 years ago, and so I think it'd be really interesting to start up those conversations again with everybody, see how the site is, how it's changed. But again, we've left it very open.
Yeah, that's the
best. I work best like that.
That's the best way. And then maybe we can do another conversation the other side in a year and see where we got to.
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah, and this year I just sort of mentioned that. I mean, even this year on the Everton Park meadows, we got funding, and we're doing flower pressing kits for families around the site to encourage them to go. And that's like the sort of sheer willpower and determination of Richard Scott from the National Wildflower Centre, which is sort of been scooped up by Eden Projects now, and also Polly Mosley, who. There's like key people, and friends of Everton Park have always been, like, you know, really good, strong supporters of what it is that we've done and where it will go.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a lovely legacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Mum. Tuning in.